had so money. It could be our last episode of the season because the Colorado Avalanche were 3-2 overtime winners over the Tampa Bay Lightning in Game 4, giving them a 3-1 series lead, heading back to Denver for Friday night's Game 5. The Stanley Cup will be in the building. But there's a lot to talk about looking at that game. Let's just set it up for a better perspective before I hand it over to you. The Avalanche right now are minus 160 in Game 5. The Lightning plus 140. The over-under is at 6. Game 4 was the first game to go under the total, even though it went the extra frame. And the series line, the Avalanche are now minus $1,400 to win 100 to win the Stanley Cup. The Lightning 8-1. Coming off of Game 4, or heading into Game 4, I should say, you and I were both saying that it seemed like the market was going to overreact to what we saw from Tampa Bay in Game 3, and we were getting a good price on Colorado and the under. And both of those, for the first time the series, we kind of nailed the game and the game script. For this series, my first inkling is kind of the opposite, where it looks like you're going to be paying a premium, like a clinching premium on Colorado at home here, as the Lightning have drifted to plus 140 already.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that the line is definitely going to be inflated towards Colorado. And I think a lot of that, we have to break down Game 4 first, because there was stuff that I saw that kind of leads me into Game 5. So what I saw from Colorado is a team that kind of took a page out of the Tampa Bay playbook, right? They started the game. I didn't think Colorado started the game poorly. They did give up that early goal, but as the first period went on, Colorado was absorbing Tampa Bay's best shot, and they were hanging around just like how Tampa Bay does. And then as the game kind of progressed, Colorado got stronger and stronger. Now, I think a lot of that does have to do with the fact that it's no secret that Tampa Bay is pretty banged up right now, right? They played most of that game with 5 defensemen. I don't have the final on ice numbers right now, but I think Sergachev might have been their top minutes guy there. And we know that Kucherov is not 100%. We know that Paul is not 100%. Obviously, Braden Point is out. There's a lot of injury concerns there for Tampa Bay. So that leads me into Game 5, where and I think you mentioned this before we started this series, that you thought that as this series goes on, Colorado's rest factor is going to be better for Colorado as the series goes on. And I think that we're starting to see that now. Colorado, they are carrying the play. And I think that we saw this in overtime. That was a dominant overtime period. So normally I would say, just looking at the number, that it is inflated. But we need to take Tampa Bay's injuries into account as well.
Yeah, and I mean, this number might not stop moving up, or I mean, it will stop eventually, of course, but like it could. There's still room to grow, I think, into Colorado for what you just said. One, Darcy Kemper was really, really good for the Avalanche in Game 4.
The enigma that is Darcy Kemper.
Yeah, Darcy Kemper. He's in that Martin Jones bin of goaltenders now, where Mike Smith, where you have your regular therapist, and then you also have your therapist for NHL goalies, where you talk about Mike Smith and Darcy Kemper and Martin Jones. But he was really good, and I think that's going to give the market confidence, and that's going to give bettors confidence in the Avalanche. If their biggest question mark didn't look like a question mark in the most recent game, folks are going to bet on a team that doesn't really have any other real flaws. And then, like you said, the injury issues for the Lightning are just, I mean, it's hard to watch at some point. It's like watching Cirelli go to the room, coming back. He couldn't take faceoffs because he had an injury to his arm. So Brandon Hagel was taking draws for in his stead, and then they would switch spots. It was just getting, I don't want to say pathetic because it's more impressive, but it was just like getting hard to watch. This team, like Ryan McDonough clearly isn't 100%. He was injured late in the Rangers series. Like you said, Kucherov, so now Cirelli, Nick Paul, Chernak. You just go down the list and they're in the lineup. But when Nikita Kucherov is at 100%, he's one of the best 10 players in the league. So when he's at 65%, you're losing a superstar. He's still a good player, but he's not a superstar. And I actually thought he was pretty good tonight. But yeah, like the Avalanche, it seemed like the Lightning's game plan was, because they know that as these games wear on, the miles are just going to catch up to them, that they needed to get out to the early lead, and they did, but they weren't able to really deal that like death blow, right? Like with their best period was the first period, and they only got out of there up 1-0. So it's that's really where the game was lost. And I'm expecting for game 5, Colorado, it's like there's blood in the water. The fangs are out. They'll be baying for blood. So we're going to see a team that we're going to see the same. My guess is we see the same kind of performance from the Avalanche in period 1 of game 5 that we saw in overtime of game 4, right? Like it'll just be a continuation of them trying to be like, we know, because we've learned from the Maple Leaf series and the Rangers series and from series in prior playoffs that you just can't let this Lightning team off the mat.
Exactly.
So I think that, for someone who's betting on unders and betting on, first period unders and other correlated derivatives off of low scoring games, I think I'm going to flip the script a little bit going into game 5, because I think with Colorado pushing, it should be a little bit more helter skelter. And that's especially true if Chernak and the Lightning defense is as walking wounded as they looked.
Yeah, completely agree. And we saw that in games 1 and 2, where if Colorado gets ahead early, Tampa Bay has no choice but to open it up, especially in an elimination game. I do need to bring up the Canucks here. There was anytime a team goes up 3-1 in the Cup Finals and they're coming home, you always have the kind of the celebration that this team is going to win now, and they've got the cup at home, they got all the momentum, and that's why you pay the premium that's built into it. But I'll never forget that game 5 in Madison Square Garden, the Canucks, it was supposed to be done, good team that just nice little cute run into the Stanley Cup final, and now they're going to get smoked in game 5. They got behind in that game 3-0, and they came back and won that game. So that was one of my favorite games. So maybe one day the Canucks will be back in the cup.
Maybe next year. You just never know. Bruce Boudreau's back in the saddle, and they just signed that Russian guy, Kuzmenko. So yeah. Because that always works out. It always, as Nikita Gusev and Shevchenko for the Golden Knights. Yeah, Panarin's the only one really who's worked out. But we'll bring this back to Avalanche and Lightning from the Canucks. As always, we do like to touch on them on the show. So I think just from looking at it right now, before we'll hear nothing from the coaches, but before we hear from how players are trending in the lineup, for me, this game, the numbers are telling me the Lightning are going to be the value side on the money line, and I'm going to probably be betting the over. And for fun, kind of derivative bets off of that will be related to a high scoring Lightning game like they were for game 4, a low scoring Avalanche game. And I don't feel terribly comfortable with the Lightning money line bet, just because of what you were talking about with the litany of injuries, the fact that the Avalanche, they've just been so good in this postseason, 15-3 overall, which will probably go down as one of the most dominant that we've seen in the salary cap era. If they win game 5, the Los Angeles Kings lost 4 games en route to their 2012 Stanley Cup victory. And they're 8-1 in their last 9. All of this with goaltending that has been, suspect. So while I know that Andrei Vasilevsky against Darcy Kemper is still a mismatch in favor of Vasilevsky, and that gives me a little bit of comfort when I'm going to be betting the Lightning for game 5. It just feels, it does feel, and maybe this is just because this game just ended, it does feel like kind of a fool's errand going there. But, it's numbers and not teams. That's what those sharp bettors like you out there always tell me.
Yeah, I completely agree with you here. I can't see myself getting on Colorado just because of the premium that that I would have to pay. Like there's no reason for me to bet that. I could see myself on Tampa Bay if this gets a little bit out of control. I think that you we've seen this. I fell victim to this after game two. You you don't want to count this team out, right? So even with all the injuries and stuff, like you like if Tampa Bay is able to weather that first period storm they're going to face in game five, if they're able to make that game a coin flip, you just never know. So I can see myself on Tampa Bay. I'm more likely going to come in on the over here. And we touched on this earlier. If Colorado gets out to an early lead, Tampa Bay has no choice but to open it up. And I think that there's a higher probability of Colorado getting out to a first period lead in that situation in game five than it is Tampa Bay kind of locking it down with their injuries from the outset.